Hello, welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews. I am Commander Alyssa Chen Riley, your number one for this video, and I am here to talk about Star Trek Strange New Worlds, episodes 6 through 10. I did a previous video on episodes 1 through 5, which you should also check out. In this video, I will be talking about episodes 6 through 10 in a very spoilery way. That should go without saying in this day and age. That's my personal opinion, but I'm saying it anyway. You've been warned. This is how I'm doing episodes these days. I used to do them week by week, but I just don't have the energy to do a video a week anymore. I'm only doing things on this channel occasionally, so I'd rather sit down and do one long video that covers each half of the season, or two long videos, I should say, that covers each half of the season, than have to worry about doing a video every week. So that's where we are now. But because this will be a very long video, I will include timestamps in the description below so that you can click on the review for each video, or each episode, I should say. So I'm going to go through each episode, 6 through 10, and then I'm going to give my overall rating for the entire season, and maybe some last thoughts for season 3 of Strange New Worlds. So without further ado, let me go ahead and get started by talking about episode 6. Okay, let's start with season 3, episode 6, The Salad Who Ate Its Tail. I'm just gonna say outright to start this off that this ends up being my favorite episode of the season, and I don't necessarily think that that's a good thing, but I'll get to that at the end of my review for this particular episode. I'll get into that a little bit more. But this is the episode where we get our TOS crew all working together on the Farragut, and then we get our non-original characters or non-original series characters all on the Enterprise. Now, of course, Pike and Una were in the original pilot. She wasn't called Una then, but they weren't in the original series. You know what I mean? This seems to be a little bit of a setup for the Star Trek Year 1 show that Akiva Goldsman would like to do. Now, this, of course, has not been greenlit or anything like that, but it is something he has talked about that he wants to do, which is the Captain Kirk early years show. I've talked about this before, of what my opinion is. I think this would work better as a movie or a miniseries, not as a whole show, but don't need to rehash that again. I do, however, would like to see that in some form, because I do really like Paul Wesley. I really like Martin Quinn and Ethan Peck, and I like all of these actors much better than I like anyone in the J.J. Abrams films. So I would enjoy seeing that, maybe just not as a TV show. So this, I really liked it, and I was pushing back on my written Facebook review. By the way, episodes 6 through 9, I wrote written reviews on my Facebook page, which you should check out. And so I'm going to be saying a lot of the same things that I said in those reviews. But I was pushing back against this idea of a backdoor pilot. I heard people calling, oh, this is just a backdoor pilot for Year 1. First of all, no, because there's still 2 seasons to go through Strange New Worlds after this one is over, before you can even have that show. So we're a couple years out from that even being a possibility. And then secondly, no, because the main characters of this episode were still characters from Strange New Worlds. We still got Uhura and Spock and Scotty and Chapel, those versions who are main characters on Strange New Worlds. And then also in a separate storyline, Pike and Una and Luann and Pelia and all that. Whereas with a backdoor pilot, what you typically see is like in the original series episode Assignment Earth, which was definitely a backdoor pilot for a show called Assignment Earth that never ended up getting picked up. And in that episode, Kirk and Spock were relegated to background characters so that we could put the spotlight on this new show. And that's usually what happens in backdoor pilots. There was one, I don't know if anyone remembers this, but I recently watched a video about it. But there was this Brady Bunch episode where they had like this different family, and it was like in the last season. It was the last season of the Brady Bunch that sucked, where they focused on this. I think this guy like adopted a black kid, an Asian kid, and a white kid or something, and it was like Greg Brady was friends with them or some weird thing like that, and so they just focused on that and not the Brady Bunch. Like it's the same thing. That's what backdoor pilots are. This was about the characters that we watch every single week. So I disagree with the backdoor pilot assessment. Although, I mean, there is some truth to the fact that Akiva Goldsman is, trying to experiment with putting these characters together and see what happens if it'll work for his year one show. And I think it was an absolute success. I loved the chemistry between all of these characters, especially Kirk with Scotty and then Kirk with Spock separately. Kirk with Scotty, I love how they played with the miracle worker thing. Because it shows that at this point, Scotty actually doesn't trust Captain Kirk, doesn't believe in him, and the miracles that Kirk is asking for, and actually Commander Kirk, I should say. I kind of railed against that in my written review. People call him Captain, like he's not a captain yet, he's Commander. But anyways, Commander Kirk at this point, asking Scotty to do things that are literally impossible. And then when they don't happen, Scotty's like, yeah, I told you that we couldn't do that. Such a different dynamic than what we would see where Kirk doesn't overstep his bounds. He asks for something he knows Scotty can do, even if it's like pushing him a little bit. And Scotty believes in Kirk and trusts him. And then he becomes the miracle worker and all that stuff. So I love that, the early interactions. And we get a little Kirk and Scotty a little later in another episode, although most of that episode was terrible, but we'll get to that. And then Spock being the one to like try to give Kirk that pep talk. That's kind of their first real interaction. And Uhura being the one who believes in him because she had previous interactions with him. And what I thought was an underrated episode from season 2. So yeah, all that I really, really liked. I will say that after episode 10, I'm starting to get a little bit worried that they might overdo the Kirk and the original series thing and neglect the main characters of this show, like Pike. But I'll talk about that when I get to episode 10, because it was episode 10 with the Kirk and Spock thing that I started getting a little bit worried about that. It wasn't this episode. At this time in the season, I was really enjoying what they were doing with Kirk and his first introduction to some of the original series characters. And it was a great character episode for Kirk, as we see what he was like when he very first took command and how much he still had to learn. And we see him learning the things that he has already learned by the time we see him as William Shatner in the original series, or William Shatner as him. So I thought that was all great. And then I like the Enterprise storyline as well. We saw in the trailers when they hooked up the old phones, and I was like, oh God, they're going to be ridiculous with this, and there's going to be this whole thing. It really wasn't. I thought it was respectable. They didn't take that gag too far. And we get a good pairing with Pike and Luann, which I feel like we haven't seen in a while. So that was all good. We got to see Pelia's quarters. That was fun. And I forgot to mention this initially in my written review, but we get what I believe to be the first Grateful Dead reference in Star Trek, which is exciting for me. For those of you who don't know, I am a Deadhead and a Fish fan. So to finally get that crossover where she says she was a roadie for the Dead. I believe she said in the 80s she was a roadie for the Dead, which is kind of funny. I have this whole theory about how similar Star Trek and Grateful Dead are, and I wanted to do a whole video about it, but I never did, and I don't think I ever will. But like a whole video essay, it's like shocking how much similarity there is between Star Trek and the Grateful Dead, and how little crossover there is between their fandoms. But like they both started around the same time in the mid '60s. They both center around San Francisco. They both have like obsessive fandoms, and I could go on and on, but we'll stop there because that's not what this is about. So anyway, I really loved this episode quite a lot. Now I'm going to give my rating out of 10, and I'm going to tell you right now that this is an upgrade from my original rating out of 10 from my Facebook written review. So my rating out of 10 for The Slot Who Ate His Tail is a 9, which makes it the top episode for me for the season. I originally gave it an 8.5. I decided to bump it up to a 9, perhaps because the next 2 episodes sucked so bad it made me appreciate this one a little bit more. But the reason why I think that it's not necessarily a great thing that this lands as my favorite episode of season 3 is because this was a pretty good episode. It was a 9. I liked it a lot. It was a pretty good episode. It was not a great episode, which means there were no great episodes in season 3, and that's a problem. And at the end, after I give my rating for the entire season, I'll get into a little more of my thoughts on that. But unfortunately, it only goes downhill from here. So let's go ahead and get into the dark ages of season 3. We're going to have 2 consecutive episodes that I think are absolutely abysmal. But gonna talk about them. So let's get into it. All right, that brings us to season 3, episode 7. What is Starfleet? What is Starfleet? What is Starfleet? I don't know why it makes me think of William Shatner, like it was something William Shatner would say. I don't know. Anyways, this is that documentary episode, and as you probably already figured out, if you didn't know already, I fucking hated this episode. So there's lots of problems with it. My number one first problem with it is the very concept of it. And this is different from a lot of other reviews that I read or heard. Almost all of them, other than my sibling who agrees with me on this one. But most other people, even if they hated it, which a lot of people did, a lot of people hated it. But even if they hated it, they were saying, well, I like the effort. I like the idea of the documentary. I just don't like the execution. Whereas I will take it a step further and say, I don't like the idea nor the execution. I think that the idea, the very concept of having a documentary in the 23rd century is flawed and anti-Star Trek. Like, it's against Roddenberry's vision more than anything that Deep Space Nine ever did, where people complain, this is not Roddenberry's vision. No, this is against Roddenberry's vision. And it ties to me into the whole FNN phenomenon, which is the Federation News Network, which was first introduced in Star Trek Picard, and then brought back again into Lower Decks, where we have this corporate news network in this so-called money-free utopian society. If it's a money-free utopian society, you would not have a corporate news network doing hit pieces. That just wouldn't exist. Those two things don't go together. That doesn't make any sense. It's like projecting our modern day 21st century onto this futuristic 23rd century, which has been well established to be this utopian money-free society that definitely would not have the FNN. And no, I don't excuse Lower Decks, even though it's like a cartoon. I do give it a lot of passes because it's an animated show, but because it's actually just doing the same thing a live action show already did, it's just continuing something that was already done in a live action show, then it gets no pass from me for that. So along those same lines, this idea that we would have this hard-hitting documentary to make lots of money and like that wouldn't exist in the 23rd century. So no, this was not a good idea with poor execution. This was a bad idea with poor execution. This does not make any sense in the context of the well-established Star Trek universe in the 23rd century, where this kind of thing would not exist. Also, it's been well established that they don't have movies anymore. Movies are not a form of entertainment. Enterprise made that pretty clear. I think Voyager did too, although Voyager might have been focusing more on TV. I don't know if they specifically talked about movies. Definitely they've said that TV wasn't a form of entertainment anymore, but I believe movies too. And if they were still making movies in the 22nd century, then why were the crew of the Enterprise always watching these movies from the 30s and 40s and 50s or whatever? Like, it was so dumb. I think it was one of the dumbest things about Enterprise was the movie night. But they well established they don't have movies anymore in the 22nd century, never mind the 23rd century. So it's already going against canon. It doesn't make sense within the established rules of the world that has been established for nearly 60 years now. So no, not a good idea. Very anti-Star Trek, the whole very concept of even having a documentary in the first place. Now, as for the execution of it, yeah, it was a shitty documentary. I mean, it was not only it wasn't just a documentary, it was a bad documentary. It was poorly done, it was poorly edited, it was poorly shot. There's one of the YouTubers that I like to watch, his name is Nick on Sci Fanatics. He used to be a cameraman for many years, and he was like really offended by this episode. First of all, because cameramen have all been replaced by drones, and the drones are terrible. Like that they don't do a good job. The whole thing was poorly shot, and the counter argument to this being a bad documentary that I heard was that, yes, the show knows and understands that that's the whole point, that this is a bad documentary. So my counter argument to that counter argument is, then why the fuck did Starfleet commission a bad documentarian who was going to do a hit piece on them? He was commissioned by Starfleet to do this. That makes no sense. No, that makes no sense. And then there was the cinematography of the episode, like. And I knew, as soon as I knew that this was going to be a documentary episode, which I figured out a couple weeks ahead of time, I knew that they were going to do this, like the drones flying around, going up Captain Pike's nose, like just going up, just getting extreme close-ups of people's faces, and it's just very distracting. It was hard for me to follow this episode. And then we have the plot itself, which is Starfleet assisting an aggressive alien race in a war that has nothing to do with the Federation. Starfleet actually taking sides in a war, and helping them to abuse the sentient life form. That is all very anti-Starfleet. Now, it is implied that there is some sort of reason behind that, and we just don't see it. I think we needed to see what the reason was. We need an explanation for why Starfleet would be seemingly break all their values and rules that, what Starfleet stands for, and actually taking a side in a war. But anytime there was an opportunity to say it, Pike just goes classified. Well, isn't that convenient? It just seems like a plot convenience to not have to explain why Starfleet is acting so out of character, and I think that is bullshit. Also, it kind of gives Ortegas's brother, I forget his name, Beto. What was the name? Whatever his name was. I guess I guess I should say Erica's brother, because he is also Ortega's. But anyways, that guy, like, it gives him an excuse to be like, ooh, look, Starfleet is evil. See, ooh, because it kind of looks like they are in that context, because he doesn't actually hear the classified reason behind why Starfleet is even doing what they're doing in the first place. But we, the audience, need to know that, because to me, it looks like Starfleet is just acting completely out of character. And I don't accept classified as an explanation. I think we deserve an explanation. Otherwise, okay, Starfleet is just completely going against all the values of the Federation for no reason, because we don't get one. So, this episode sucks. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and give my rating out of 10. I still feel this is a little generous. But I think that I liked it slightly better than that horrible holodeck episode that I gave a 3 out of 10 to. So I'm going to be very generous and give this a glaring 4 out of 10, much higher than this episode deserves, but still a bad rating. A 4 out of 10 from me. The next episode is not going to get as high as a 4. So let's get into that, unfortunately. All right, now we get to season 3, episode 8, 4.5 Vulcans. Pass. Okay, let's move on to the next one. I pass on this one. Oh, do I have to talk about this again? I didn't even want to write that review that I wrote, because I just don't even want to think about this episode. And I'm still going to talk about it yet again when I do my discussion with Mark and Darren on Monday. And that'll be fun, though, because I think that they feel similarly to me about this episode. So I'm just going to start out front. Not only is this easily, by far, the absolute worst piece of shit episode Strange New Worlds has ever done, but it is in competition for one of the worst in all of modern Star Trek. I would probably put it as my 3rd worst. I think 2 of 1 from Picard season 2, and then the Peanut Hamper episode will always be mathematically. What the fuck was that called? Redemption, whatever. The Peanut Hamper episode. That it will always be the worst one, because every second of it was grating on my nerves. And that's also kind of true of this episode, but that one was even worse. Because that's not true. There's one storyline in this episode that I didn't absolutely hate, and I'll start with that. That's the Scotty and Kirk thing. I referenced it earlier. Like, I did like Scotty and Kirk. Their interactions, even though it makes absolutely no goddamn sense that Kirk would be on the Enterprise at this point. I had previously been pushing back against this whole thing about, doesn't he have his own ship? This episode, doesn't he have his own ship? Like, why is it? It doesn't really make any sense for him to be there. But other than that, I did like that interaction, and that's the only thing, the only redeeming quality of this episode. So we knew that this was coming because they had that sneak peek scene last year, Comic-Con, and when I saw that, I was like, oh god, I hope the rest of season 3 isn't this bad. And, like, unfortunately, a lot of it is pretty bad, but not all of it. But I thought that scene when I first saw it was absolutely terrible. The whole thing was dumb. This whole concept of turning them into Vulcans, and then they do this like slow motion rock song with a rock song playing down the hallway. I am very much against modern music in Star Trek. I think it needs to have a score, and I don't think we should be using modern music in Star Trek. I didn't like it when the Abrams films did it, and Strange New Worlds did it a few times in season 3, and I don't like it. It doesn't fit for me. And of course, Enterprise having the world's worst theme song also didn't like that either, obviously. But it's been a long road getting from there to here. Anyways, I had to say that. Anyways, yeah, it was a god awful scene. And then them making jokes about like making fun of Spock for being a half a Vulcan, and then them going down and fixing the problem immediately because turning into Vulcans makes you have superpower. Like Vulcans have superpowers, apparently. This episode says. The depiction of Vulcans overall is a real big problem for this episode. I'll get into that in just a minute. But yeah, so I saw that scene and I was like, well, maybe it's like just like a dream sequence, and they're not showing us what the episode is really about. But then when I saw the title, 4.5 Vulcans, I was like, well, it can't be a dream sequence. They wouldn't title it that if it was just about a dream. So it's a thing that happens. And watching the episode itself, it's just like even worse than the sneak peek scene. So first of all, I just gotta let's follow the logic for how this even happens, like how they even get to this concept of having your choice but to turn 4 crew members into Vulcans. So there's this planet, right, that the Vulcans made first contact with before they were in the Federation. So they weren't breaking the Prime Directive because they weren't in the Federation yet. So that's a little convenient thing. So there's a lot of mental gymnastics that the writers have to go through. A lot of hoops they're jumping through to get to this. So follow this. So there is this planet that the Vulcans made contact with that are pre-warp, but it was before they joined the Federation. Also, the classic Star Trek convenient trope where the Enterprise is the only ship that can possibly get there in time, which is, to be fair, something used in a lot of episodes. But also that it was what they need to go and stop is there's this nuclear reactor that the Vulcans just left behind without leaving anyone to watch it. Like, it's a pre-warp society. So the Vulcans provided them with a nuclear reactor. That seems very un-Vulcan-like, but okay, fine. And then they just like pieced out and didn't leave anyone behind to oversee it. And of course, eventually it's going to have a problem, and none of the people down there can do anything about it. And I mean, that was inevitable. Like, that is illogical for the Vulcans to just leave that there. Of course, the Enterprise happens to be the only ship nearby, and they have to be Vulcans because even though they're a pre-warp society, they happen to have this very convenient technology that can scan deep into you and see that you weren't actually a Vulcan, which is fucking bullshit. Like, this is so ridiculous. The mental gymnastics we have to get to get to the reason why they would turn into Vulcans in the first place. That is so fucking bullshit. Like, and I know people with comedy episodes, just like with Lower Decks, we'll give it a little bit of grace. No! No grace for this episode. No grace for you. No. Like, so the very concept, again, like the last one, the very concept is flawed. It doesn't make any sense. And then, okay, so Pelia was supposed to be turned into a Vulcan, but it fails, so she doesn't end up turning into a Vulcan. So Spock is like, oh, well, then I guess I will replace her part of the mission. Guys. So you're telling me they're going down to a planet that only knows Vulcans, and they weren't going to send the one actual Vulcan on the ship. The original plan was to not send the one actual Vulcan on the ship. I haven't even gotten into this episode yet, and I'm already screaming. I don't know. I may have to save some of this. This has already gone 8 minutes. I may have to say some of this for the live chat that I'm going to do with Mark and Darren, where we can just rant and rave at each other. But yeah, each and every storyline was awful. I don't know if I'm going to go through all 4 of them right now. But the Pike one, I didn't understand. Like, first of all, Pike wasn't like a Vulcan for me. He was like, what was all of the screaming? He's always shouting. And the intro credits where he's like, "Space, the final frontier." And like, what was that? To me, it sounded like he was doing a bad William Shatner impression, but he was shouting it. I was like, I guessed that he was trying to do the Vulcan voice, but not actually seeing him with the ears, just hearing the voice, like it didn't even sound like a Vulcan to me. It was like, why is he shouting and doing a bad William Shatner impression? Like it was awful. And then apparently Pike turning into a Vulcan means he turns into Captain Jellicoe. like he was when he changed all the ships. I don't think it was exactly the same thing that Jellicoe did, but it was a similar kind of thing. And I was expecting Pike to say, "Get it done." Like, why does becoming a Vulcan make him a bad captain like Jellicoe? Like, I don't know. It makes no sense. None of the logic for any of this logic. There is no logic in this. And the depiction of Vulcans. I mean, I know the Vulcans aren't a real, actual race that exists in the real world, but it was racist as fuck because it boils them down to like one or two characteristics and not a deeply developed, complex species, which they have been portrayed as in the past. Like, there's so much more to Vulcans than what is portrayed in this episode. So it is like just a caricature of what Vulcans are. And I don't even know why Luann was a Romulan. I'm out of here. Okay, sorry about that. Talking about this episode just makes me feel so frustrated and angry. But I do have to give my rating out of 10. You already know what the rating out of 10 for this episode is. It is a 1, the worst episode in the entire series, and at least in the top 3 worst episodes in all of Modern Trek, and that includes all those awful Star Trek Picard Season 2 episodes, all the bad Discovery episodes, everything. This is by far the fucking worst, or the third worst, really, of the entire Modern Trek franchise. Fuck this episode to hell. Okay, now finally we can move into episodes that at least don't totally suck. All right, now we move on to season 3, episode 9, Terrarium. And yes, it is now nighttime. I was daytime in my previous segments. It is now nighttime. I needed a little break after the 4.5 Vulcans rant that I did. And I didn't even finish. I will still need more to talk about when I do my end of season rankings and discussion with Mark and Darren. Anyways, season 3, episode 9, Terrarium. And I do think I'm probably giving this one a higher rating than I would have if it were in a season where it was like surrounded by a couple of mediocre or pretty good episodes, or especially if it like came after a really great episode, like if it came after Those Old Scientists or something like that, then I probably would be rating it lower. But because of the fact that I was starving for an episode that wasn't absolutely horrible, that I got this. I was like, oh, thank God this episode doesn't suck. So the rating probably is a little higher than it otherwise would have been. However, I'm not gonna change the rating that I gave it on my Facebook review because context matters. It's a part of rating episodes. Where it fits in the season is part of it. So I'm going to keep the rating, and I'll tell you what the rating is at the end, but I'll tell you that I did really love this episode. It is a trope that we've seen before, which is the enemy mine trope, and I don't mind them repeating tropes like this if they're able to bring something new to the table. And there are certain tropes that I feel like they do over and over and never bring anything new to the table, like the virus trope and the trapped in a holodeck trope, which I have talked about earlier in the season in my episodes 1 through 5 video. Those I feel like they really don't ever bring anything new to the table, and that's why I don't like them. But the enemy mine trope kind of lends itself to doing good character work. because it's when you have a character trapped on a planet with an enemy, and they're trying to work for survival. I think that lends itself to the possibility of doing a good character sketch, and this one does. It does with Ortegas. And by the way, I just want to say that just in general, I would much rather that they just repeat tropes that they've done before, or that Star Trek has done before, than to do this take a big swing nonsense that they're doing, where they just feel the need to, oh, let's do the zombie episode, let's do the musical episode, let's do an episode where all the crew turns into Vulcans, and if, and the fucking puppets that they're doing in season 4. Let me tell you this, I would rather they do this trope again next season, like with a different character, like have them banging a Klingon trapped on a planet. I would rather them do that if it meant they took away the fucking puppet episode. I would much rather them redo tropes than to do this ridiculous nonsense where they're trying to take a big swing and they end up doing this dumbass shit. Just stick to what makes Star Trek good, goddammit. Anyways, that was a side rant. We get a good character story for Ortegas, and the first Ortega-centric episode in 3 seasons. Finally, we get an Ortegas episode, and it's a good one, and it follows up on a story arc that started earlier in the season, and this is the first season where she gets a season-long character arc. Now, granted, it does vanish completely for several episodes at a time, but they did at least pay it off. And that's, of course, the PTSD she suffered from the Gorn. Now, I did find this to be a predictable episode. Like, I saw the photos that were released prior to the episode coming out, and I saw a video that was talking about, it looks like she might be trapped on a planet with somebody, and it might be an enemy mine type situation. I was like, Gorn. I mean, that was obvious. And then when she was on that planet, it was like, Gorn is going to be there. It was predictable, but that doesn't mean it wasn't good. And I love that they're finally showing the Gorn as not just these monsters, because that's originally what they were portrayed as back in the original series. So they finally circled back around and got to that and show that this Gorn was a good person. And I really enjoyed Ortegas's journey and coming to just completely change her perception from being afraid of the Gorn to like actually seeing beyond that. And we've seen this, it's a very Star Trek thing, like not just in enemy mine type episodes, but I think of I, Borg, where Geordi was able to see beyond the Borgness of Hugh and see him as a sentient like person, and someone he could be friends with. So that is a very Star Trek thing to do, and I think it works really well. And it works well to finally have an in-depth story for Ortegas. God, I've been waiting for this for 3 seasons. I hope we get more. I personally would still, I've been complaining about the romances, but I would like to see Ortegas involved with somebody. We, to this date, still don't even know what Ortegas's sexuality is. I'm not 100%, but I believe the real actor is queer. But the character hasn't, maybe they're asexual. They haven't really talked about being interested in anybody. So I don't know. As much as I complain about romances, I would like to see Ortegas involved with somebody, preferably from outside of the Enterprise, like not one of the known crew members would be my preference. And it'd be cool if it was queer. So there's still more I want to see with Ortegas, but I'm so happy that we got this. And the ending was very powerful. I know a lot of people complained about Luann shooting the Gorn, and I did think it was a little silly that they're doing a rescue mission and they're bringing down a security team with big giant rifles. Like, did they know that there would be a Gorn there? Like, I don't think they did. So that was a little silly. But the fact that Luann does end up shooting the Gorn and how that affects Ortegas, I thought was very good. More the effect on Ortegas is what really drew me in to the episode. Now, this episode, unfortunately, is not perfect. There's a couple of issues that I have with it. The first one being this like ticking clock thing that they do, or like, oh, we have to deliver these vaccines. But do you? Because you keep delaying it and delaying it. And then there's a line at one point where it's like, oh, we've been waiting for 2 days, which I also thought was a little awkward that it took them 2 days to send a probe after Ortega's. But it's been 2 days. And how urgent is these vaccines really? And also, if they have to deliver these vaccines in an urgent time period, the whole reason that Ortega's crashed on this planet is because she was doing this scientific like exploration thing. She was like going out in the shuttle to do this scientific, um, yeah, taking data or whatever it was. If they really had to deliver vaccines, why are they stopping to do that? Like that kind of reminds me of the Space Adventure Hour, where they're like, "Oh, we're doing this highly dangerous scientific experiment with this star, but let's also do this highly dangerous experiment with the holodeck like at the same time." Like it doesn't make any sense. So that kind of reminded me of that a little bit. Um, and then my biggest issue with this is the inclusion of the Metrons. We didn't need it. It was definitely Metrons. They're from that other show. Like that's what that was, and they were completely unnecessary. They didn't add anything. I know that the show was, foreshadowing it with seeing that little light the whole time. I don't think you needed that at all. Like I think you cut that out. I think the episode is more powerful if you don't have the Metrons. They also retcon the Metrons to now they're trying to say that they're interested in studying humans versus Gorn specifically, because they're like, oh well, we're gonna have to do another experiment with humans and Gorn, which that was not at all the case in Arena. They were just broadly studying what they consider to be lower life forms or whatever, and their need to fight each other, and they were studying that. And it wasn't specific to humans versus Gorn, so they're retconning in here, and they didn't need to. There was no reason for this. So let me go ahead and give my rating out of 10 for Terrarium. My rating out of 10 is an 8.5. I was all set to give it a 9 until the Metrons showed up. So the Metrons were worth minus 0.5 off of the score. They didn't completely ruin the episode, but it's like, well, why are they there? So it took a half a point off the score. So the final score for this episode is an 8.5, a welcome 8.5 after the previous two episodes combining for a total score of 5. So very happy to see this. All right, now we got one more episode to go, and then we're gonna do a summary of the entire season and a rating for the entire season. Okay, now we get to the season finale, season 3, episode 10, New Life and New Civilizations, because that's the one portion of the opening monologue that they haven't included in an episode title yet. We've had These Are the Voyages. We've had, of course, Strange New Worlds itself, the name of the show, and it was the name of an episode, comes from that opening monologue. The Final Frontier is the name of a movie. So what else have they done? There's at least one other part. And I don't know what's left. I'll have to listen to the monologue again, but I'll listen to it again and I'll probably predict an episode title for next season. Not a fan of the title is my point. First thing before I get into the episode is that my prediction did not come true. I said because they introduced Kirk in season 1 finale and Scotty in the season 2 finale that we were going to get Sulu or McCoy in the season 3 finale, and that didn't turn out to be true. Oh well. I like patterns. I like to see patterns, so I thought that they were going to do that. Anyways, so this episode, I will say it's going to sound like I hated it because most of what I'm going to say is criticisms of the episode. As most of it is kind of negative. So let me start by saying I didn't actually hate this episode. This is still better than literally, if you look at the ratings, I still rated it higher than What If Starfleet and 4.5 Vulcans combined. So it's still, it is not one of the bad episodes. I did glean some enjoyment out of it. I think that there was a good character payoff for Patel. I don't like some of the details for how they got there, but emotionally there was a good payoff, and emotionally a good story for Pike having to deal with this. This is something that they have been doing all season long that I've talked about in previous episodes that I did think worked well. And I didn't, I wasn't totally like hating this episode as I was watching it. Like four and a half Vulcans, I did glean some enjoyment out of it. And it's not going to sound like that as I get into it because I have a lot of negative things to say. So this was a sequel, of course, to episode 5. And after that episode, I said like it was kind of all over the place, and they're kind of introducing all of these different concepts and not really developing them and not explaining them. So I was hoping that the sequel that we were going to inevitably get in episode 10, which was obvious to me at the time, that I was hoping that that sequel episode would kind of tie all that stuff together and give us some really cool insights onto like these ancient aliens that created that prison for the Vesda, and like maybe it would be something. I was hoping it wouldn't be the Iconians, but maybe it was something like that. That would be really interesting and cool, and they were really tie together all these weird timey-wimey stuff. Like, because I felt like I said this in my episode 5 review that they were just kind of throwing in like random thing. Oh, time moves this way now for no particular reason, and now we're gonna have to like create this Indiana Jones bridge for no particular reason. It just seemed like all disjointed random things that just got thrown in there for no particular reason. So I wanted to tie them all together. Like the timey-wimey stuff in episode 5, I can't remember if I said this. I think I may have forgot to say this in my original review. So but forgive me if it's a repeat, but my thought was it reminded me of the TNG episode "We'll Always Have Paris," not to be confused with the Tom Paris. We'll always have Tom Paris, which is from Lower Decks, but We'll Always Have Paris, where they had this really cool kind of like timey-wimey thing that happened for no particular reason that had nothing to do with the rest of the episode, and like it reminded me of that. So I was hoping for better in episode 10, and it wasn't. It was the same fucking thing. Like it was still like, oh, we're gonna do this random timey-wimey thing for no particular reason, and like I love timey-wimey stuff. If you know me, you know I love that timey-wimey stuff, but not just randomly thrown in there for no particular reason. And again, just like the episode 5, the one that this is a sequel to, this episode was very disjointed, and just kind of like randomly just throwing in random things all the time. And the main plot was silly. It just was. And it's interesting because I watched a couple different video reviews that make a couple different comparisons. Jessie Gender was comparing this to Star Wars. She said this felt more like Star Wars. Then my sibling Mark compared it to like a fantasy like Lord of the Rings. For me, this was 100% the MCU and a comic book movie. In fact, when Patel's eyes get like galaxies, it looks like Captain Marvel or something to me. Like she's 100% a superhero. and like this whole thing with her having the Gorn DNA combined with the Illyrian DNA and whatever the other thing was, and like all these different things combining, that like that was her superhero origin story. It was a pretty lame superhero origin story, but that's what it was. And then her being like, I'm the Guardians of the Galaxy. That's what I forget what the name of that thing was called, but that's basically what it was. Good versus evil. I will stop the evil bad guys. And then, of course, the bad guys are mustache twirly. And that mask that, what's his name? Not Proctor. What is I'm blanking on his name? Vincent, whatever, who's now the Vesda guy. I'm sorry that I had a brain fart of what his name is. I'll probably do a little thing across the screen to correct myself. Yeah, so that mask that he was wearing, it reminded me of the mask Data was wearing in the episode Masks, which is a very silly episode. And Lower Decks made fun of it. I am Mistuka with Captain Freeman. That's what it reminded me of, and it just felt silly. Like this whole thing just felt a little silly to me. And now we're doing this like good versus evil. I'm the superhero against the evil demon. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I'm watching The Inner Light. And then, to me, I'm sorry, but this was jarring. Like it like threw me off. I'm like, wait, what is going on now? And I expected it to be a short thing that would stop, but it just kept going. And I was like, oh, we're watching The Inner Light now, I guess. Like, I don't know. It just threw me off. See what I'm saying? Like all these random disjointed things that they just throw together. It just doesn't work for me. So I just like, it took me out of the episode. Like, I'm watching The Inner Light now. What the fuck? So, and it was, the emotional payoff was good. Like I had mentioned this before. Like I like where it leads, and it's kind of cool that Pike got to spend this lifetime with Patel before he lets her go. So that was kind of cool, and it helped with the emotional payoff at the end. But I wasn't affected strongly by it emotionally. Sorry, Mark. I wasn't. I really wasn't. Like I was just too discombobulated that all of a sudden out of nowhere I'm watching The Inner Light. Like it just did not work for me. Although the ultimate emotional payoff that it leads to does work for me. The scene itself was just kind of disjointed, and just I was sitting there the whole time like feeling out of sorts because it took me by surprise. So yeah, and then let me get into the Kirk and Spock thing, because I had alluded to this before. This is very much like, this is where Kirk and Spock become friends. And the focus that they're putting on that, it makes me worried, and hopefully I'm wrong, but it makes me worry that in season 4 they could lean into that even more, and that Akiva Goldsman could start doing his year 1 Star Trek show now while Strange New Worlds is still on, and that could cause him to neglect Pike and Una and Ortega. Una really does not get much to do. We did get to see her in the captain's chair a little bit more this season and actually doing stuff. That's good, but she hasn't gotten a centric episode since season 2, episode 2. So she needs more. Ortegas needs more. These are the characters we should be focusing on. Luann, they have focused on a lot. So that's good. Pike, they have done a good job of focusing on. But those characters, the ones who were on the Enterprise and the Salat who ate the tail rather than on the Farragut, those are the characters they really should be spending time with. But I have a feeling they're going to go the opposite direction, and that Una could end up going the way of Chakotay in the late seasons of Voyager, and just be a background character. That's what I fear, so that they can do more of this. Look at this as Kirk and Spock, and now this is Kirk and Uhura, and it's Kirk and Scotty. And like, I like that, don't get me wrong, but I don't want them to do too much of that in favor of spending time with the characters who are actually in Strange New Worlds. This is still Strange New Worlds. We're not at Star Trek Year 1 yet. So something just to keep an eye on, something that I hope I'm wrong about, but I have a feeling that they could go in that direction in season 4, so that we'll just see about that. Anyways, this episode was okay. It was fine. So my rating out of 10 for A New Life and New Civilizations is a 6, which is, for me, the 6 is like the epitome of mediocrity. Like, it's just fine. Like, it's not even a 7. It's just that. But it's not a 5. 5 is a negative rating, so it's better than that. And like I said, it's a higher score than 4.5 Vulcans and What is Starfleet combined. So it's fine. It's fine. All right, let me go ahead now and give my rating for the entire season. All right, so let me talk about my overall rating for season 3. And you may have noticed I have been promoted since the start of this video. I had to think a lot about this, because season 1 I gave a 9 to, and season 2 I initially had given a 9, but then when I did my rewatch review, I decided to downgrade it to an 8, because it was a clear point lower than season 1. So I was hoping this one would be no less than a 7, since that would just have it go in order. I was hoping for an 8, even if I was really lucky. So I was rooting for it. I wanted it so to be higher rating. So my heart was saying 7. But then when I started thinking about it rationally, it was like, what actually in this season makes it earn a 7? Because it has 3 of the worst episodes of the series are all in this season, and it does not have a great episode. It does not have a Quality of Mercy. It does not have those old scientists. In fact, my favorite episode, A Salat Who Ate His Tail, I think would be no higher than 3rd in each of the previous 2 seasons. It might even be like my 4th favorite episode in season 1 if it was in that season. So um, it's a pretty good episode, like I said before, but the fact that it is, I consider it the best of the season, is not a good sign for this season. So I was thinking, like, my heart wants it to be a 7, but is that really what this deserves? So I was thinking 6 or 7. So what I decided to do to make this decision was to add up all the ratings, divide it by 10, and get the average rating score. And this is something I don't typically do. Like, it doesn't usually work out that way necessarily. Like, my overall season rating isn't necessarily the average rating per episode. But in order to make a decision, I decided to do it, and I was like, okay, if it's between 6.0 and 6.3, then it will be a 6. If it's between 6.4 and 6.6, then it would be a 6.5, because I do 0.5 ratings. But if it's between 6.7 and higher, then I'll give it a 7. And I was pretty confident that it was going to fall in that range. So I took the average, and what I ended up with is a average rating score per episode of 6.15, or you can round it up to 6.2 if you want. But that squarely puts it in the rating of 6. So my rating out of 10 for season 3 of Strange New Worlds, sadly, is just a 6. Like, I really wanted to will it to a higher score, but if I'm being honest with myself, this is a 6 out of 10 season. It had 3 absolutely abysmal episodes. Was that episode 4 with the holodeck one? Yeah, episode 4, episode 7, and episode 8. And episode 8 being, I think, the worst of the series. So, and no great episodes. No Those Old Scientists. No Quality of Mercy. So we're getting a reverse of what normal Star Trek shows do, where season 1 is the best and it gets worse after that. I think Voyager is one that I would say season 1 was better than season 7, but I also don't think season 1 was the best season of Voyager. That would be season 4. So Voyager was kind of like that, but look at most other Star Trek shows, the first season is usually the worst one. And in this case, the first season is the best so far, and it's been getting steadily worse. And I fear for season 4, especially with the puppets, especially with what I said about maybe they're going to dig too deep into getting into the Year 1 TOS and neglecting Una and Ortegas and things like that. And then we're going to have puppets, and who knows what other ridiculous episodes we're going to have. So I fear for the future of the show, and I'm really disappointed. I'll just give you this spoiler right now that when I do my end of the year awards video, last year I did a most disappointing and a biggest surprise categories, and I am going to do that again this year. And Strange New Worlds has the most disappointed wrapped up. Like, there's no way any show could ever come out in 2025 that would disappoint me more in Strange New Worlds, because there isn't any other shows coming that I have as high of expectations as I had for Strange New Worlds. So it's just impossible. So this is going to be my most disappointing show of the year, and it's sad, really, to see Strange New Worlds, which had such a promising first season, just kind of go downhill and just regress with each successive season. And it wasn't terrible, it still ends up with a 6. It still had some good episodes, still had some average episodes, but had some pretty bad ones too. So that's where we end up, a 6 out of 10 for season 3. Okay, thanks for sticking with me for this very long of a video. Please subscribe and go to my Facebook page as well, Alyssa Jane's Reviews, because I do still do written reviews over there. And then I'll see you a couple more times this month. I'm going to do a live chat with Mark and Darren. We're going to actually rank the episodes of Strange New World Season 3. And that'll be Monday, September 15th at 6 p.m. West Coast time. And then I will do a live chat with Wine next Saturday, the 20th. Time TBD. I'll make a video where I'll make an announcement and I'll tell you the time, because it might not be the normal time. I'll let you know. All right, thanks everybody. Thanks for watching. I will see you soon. Goodbye.